I'm back with another top five, and don't worry, unlike the other one I did, this one actually sticks to actually five spots, so don't worry, it's not going to be another long one. And this one comes in courtesy of Cinematic Joshua, who asked me, what are my top five underseen time travel movies? So by underseen, I'm just going to assume you're talking about underrated or underappreciated or just time travel movies that either don't get enough love or hasn't been seen by a lot of people. So here we go. And thank you so much, Mr. Cinematic Joshua, for asking me this question. If you haven't yet, follow this man right here. His name is Cinematic Joshua. He do be posting his letterbox reviews on TikTok, and also as well follow him on Letterbox. Number five, I'm starting with one that's in a franchise and probably the only franchise film. And yeah, it's probably been seen by more people, but to me, it's underseen in terms of where it stands within the franchise and where it is to the original film. Because let's be real, that original Men in Black, that is a classic, and there hasn't been a good Men in Black movie ever since. But I'd say Men in Black 3 is the closest we'll ever get to it, and Men in Black 3 is a time travel movie, and I think it's a time travel movie that actually works. Because everything that happens within the past is the best part. I mean, Josh Brolin doing his best to impersonate Tommy Lee Jones was immaculate. And it gives us a touching story about Will Smith and his past before we see him as a full-grown adult. We see that he actually met Agent K earlier in time, and he's been looking out for him ever since. And then when they finally reunite at the end in the future, I thought that was a bit of a touching moment and a good little capper to their relationship. Plus, they go back exactly in time to the late 1960s before the ships go out into the air in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Obviously, it's not the best Men in Black movie, but I do think it's the best as far as the Men in Black sequels go. It just happens to be a good little time travel movie. At number four is The Time Machine. I have a very specific memory of this movie because I remember me and my family back in the day, we went on a road trip and we had a car with a VHS player within the car, and so we rented a couple of movies from Blockbuster, and this happened to be one of those movies. And I just remember sitting in the car and thinking, for a time, the movie started out very dark. I mean, the guy that invented the time machine, his fiance got shot and killed, and so he essentially mills this time machine just so he can go back in time and stop that. But no matter how many times he goes back and change the past, everything still turns out the way it happened, which is his wife getting killed some way in a different way. And so he just keeps going back and back until eventually he goes into the future and further into the future, and then the future is just some apocalyptic world with tribe people. I thought Guy Pearce, he was good in this movie. It's one of his earliest roles and probably one of the first movies I ever saw him in. Samantha Mumba, I remember her being some, I think, Irish singer, some overseas foreign singer or whatever. But I just remember just seeing her in this movie. I'm like, okay, and then she's just never been seen again. Like, whatever happened to her? Now, I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but I do remember liking the movie just for how dark and different it was, and it is based on the H.G. Wells story. I thought it had a nice concept about somebody trying to invent a time machine to change the future, change the past, but then no matter how many times you go back and change the past, things just turned out the way it turned out to be. In fact, I don't know what the Rotten Tomato score is for this movie. I was gonna check the Rotten Tomato scores for these movies that I'm counting down, but I totally forgot and I just started pressing record. But regardless what the tomato score says, you should really check this movie out. It may be good to you, maybe not, but I say it's worth just to see because it's definitely one of those movies like that came out. At number three is Deja Vu, which is a movie that I haven't seen in a long time, but I do remember liking it when it first came out, mainly for Denzel Washington. He's one of my favorite actors ever, and then it's one of the earliest performances of Paula Patton, and I just remember seeing her in the movie, not just thinking like, that's a beautiful woman, but like, oh, she was actually good in this movie. But I remember enjoying this, and there's an aspect of the movie where he's like, there's a machine that allows him to go back in time to change some huge event from happening. It was like a bomb or something went off, and so he tries to go back in time to stop the bomb from happening, and then he gets entangled with Paula Patton's character, who ends up dying because of this explosion or something else, but then he ends up saving her, and then he sacrifices himself, and then it goes back in time. And then the movie ends literally at the beginning of the movie when Denzel's character comes in, and it's a mind-blowing little movie. I just haven't seen it in a long time, but again, I just remember liking it, and not enough people talk about it, and it's a Tony Scott film, so yeah. Denzel and Tony Scott have done a lot of great movies together, and this happened to be one of them. If you're a fan of Denzel Washington, you should definitely check this out. Or even if you're a Tony Scott fan, you should definitely check this out. Number two is a movie that I actually revisited at the beginning of the year, and that is The Butterfly Effect. I remember liking this movie, but just liking it, admiring, just intrigued by how dark it was. Because I remember I watched this as a teenager, and just everything he pretty much write everything down in the journal, and then once he reads it as a adult, it basically takes him back to that point in time so that he can change something that happened. And there's a lot of trauma that happens in his life, and so he just goes back and changes everything, but nothing seems to work out, and so he makes the ultimate sacrifice. And I do remember this being a huge role for Ashton Kutcher, because he was primarily known for comedies and rom-coms, but then to see him in this, it was like, oh, okay, Ashton, I didn't know you had this in you. I do remember seeing the Rotten Tomatoes score for this, and it was quite low, but it does have some love from people over the years. But I've always liked this movie for how dark it is, Ashton Kutcher's performance, and just how weird and dark and depressing it is in a way. And I do remember watching this movie for the first time and thinking, that's a great concept for a time travel movie. And finally, at number one, is what you're looking at, JGL. But Looper is at number one for me as an underseen time travel movie, though I do remember when it first came out, everybody basically agreed that this was a good movie, and it was directed by Rian Johnson. And then Rian Johnson made The Last Jedi, and all of a sudden everybody forgot all the goodwill he had built up with a lot of people because of this movie. And yet people forget, because of The Last Jedi, people want to give him shit for it, and yet they forgot that he directed this underseen gem, and then he made Knives Out. People don't want to get over The Last Jedi. But the point is, if you haven't seen Looper, great movie and great time travel movie where you basically sent to assassinate people from the future. Do that, you get some gold, you get to celebrate, and then you get to go off. After 30 years, you get to go off. But then JGL's character, he turns out somebody sent himself to kill himself, but then he basically, JGL's character, he's living a peaceful life, he finds a wife, but then his wife gets killed, and so he goes back in time to kill the person who would eventually kill his wife. And then the second half of this movie goes into a little romance between JGL and Emily Blunt's character, and now they have to stop Bruce Willis, and probably one of Bruce Willis' best performances before things started to unfortunately go downhill for him health-wise. This is a great time travel movie, and just watch, if you're a Last Jedi hater, go watch this movie, and it'll remind you like, oh, so Rian Johnson is a good filmmaker, and maybe I'm just being an asshole. But those are my picks for top 5 underseen time travel movies. Tell me in the comment section, what are your top 5 underseen time travel movies? Or if there is a top 5 that you want me to answer, also leave in the comment section below.